All right, we're in 1 Timothy, and we're in verse 3. Jessica, did you pass it along there? If I read verse 3. 1 Timothy, verse 3.
As I urged you when I went into Macedonia, stay there in Ephesus so that you may command certain men not to teach false doctrines any longer, nor to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies. These promote controversies rather than God's word, which is by faith. I think I read two.
Yeah, verse 3 is just half a sentence.
Sorry. I
So we went ahead and read the whole sentence. That's good.
I could not see the number. I'm sorry.
But all your questions this morning are just on verse 3, and we're probably not going to get to them. Have you ever wondered where some of these places were? You read the Bible, this is Macedonia. Have you ever wondered where that is?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
where is it?
North of Greece.
Do you ever look it up?
Yeah, some of my Bibles in the past have had like 3 maps, but nothing's ever titled what I read. You know, it's
Yeah.
like, what is that? Where is that supposed to be?
Correct.
Okay.
There's 2 Macedonia, isn't it?
Is it? Go ahead.
There's a country called Macedonia, and then there's a state in Greece that's Macedonia. They actually sued each other because Greece didn't want the country of Macedonia using that name because they thought it was a Greek thing. And so they sued each other in the European Union. So now there's a country called Macedonia, and now there's a state in Greece called North Macedonia, I think.
Okay.
So they get all, they get it.
Well, this Macedonia, where Paul was in this verse, is up against the southern part of Germany and over against the western side of Russia. So if you were to go there now, you would see the countries of Bulgaria, Serbia, Yugoslavia, Georgia, those little countries right there in that little corner where Germany comes together with Russia. And then Russia comes down and goes across the top of Afghanistan. So it's right in there. Greece is down here, Israel's down here somewhere, Germany's up here north, and then Russia comes down like this. Okay. So that's where Macedonia is. It is it's where a lot of my relatives come from. So that's where Macedonia is. What does he says? Urge. I urge you. I urge you. What does that indicate?
Matter of importance.
Yeah, it's a matter of importance and a matter of urgency. Okay. He's saying this is very, very important. You have to listen to me. What I am about to say, everything is based on it. The word is a very strong Greek word, and it demands attention. It's not just one of those, we butchered the English language. We have totally butchered it. We say all kinds of things that don't make any sense whatsoever. When I was in school, there was a Japanese kid studying with us one night, and he was from Japan, and he spoke very good English. But one of the guys said, why don't we go get a pizza? And everybody, why don't we all chip in and go get a pizza? And everybody said, okay, except for the one guy, and he said, well, I can't go, I'm broke. Okay. Now, we all know what that means, right? It doesn't have any money. But what does broke have to do with money? Broke means damage. Broke means something is...
I am broke. I'm damaged.
Fractured. So the Japanese kid looked at him and said, oh, what'd you break? He said, well, I don't have any money. He said, well, why'd you say you were broke? Well, broke means I don't have any money. Well, I thought broke meant that maybe you damaged your leg or something. Well, no. And I went and looked it up, and it wasn't in the dictionary that way. It is now. They've added it. But the word broke doesn't have anything to do with money. And we butchered the English language. Well, if you go back in the Greek, it's a very firm, very strong command type thing. It's saying, you need to listen. And also, he's he's encouraging him in his struggle. What do you suppose Timothy's struggle was? Paul had sent him up to Ephesus before he went to Rome. And you find out in chapter 4 of 1 Timothy what his struggle was. If you turn to 4:11, or I'll read it to you. Don't let anyone look down on your youth. Timothy was feeling insufficient and was feeling overwhelmed and inexperienced. It was not about Timothy, but it was about the society at the time. What do we consider in America to be the age of maturity?
It's changed.
If it's not 18. Depends on what age you're talking
No,
about.
that's why we don't let kids drink at 18, because it's not 18. But what do we consider to be?
It was about 30.
21. Legally, it's 21. They can buy alcohol, they can buy cigarettes, they can buy cocaine in Colorado, or not cocaine, but marijuana in Colorado. And when it, now, I don't necessarily agree with that, it depends on the kids. And I think girls are more mature at 21 than guys are. Guys mature at a later date. But in this society, the age of accountability, or the age when, what do you do? Huh?
Jordan was sticking his tongue out.
Proving your point.
We'll let you know what that age is.
Jordan?
Not all of that.
Okay, children.
Oh, I'll leave it
Straighten
to you with it.
Okay, but it was the age of 30 in this day and age. Jesus didn't start his ministry until he was 30. Why? Because nobody would have taken him seriously. You belonged to your mother until you were 12. And then after you were 12, you went to your father and started learning a trade, or being his apprentice, or going to school like Paul did with Gamaliel, and getting your higher education. And then you did that until you were 30. And then at 30, you were considered to be a man, and you were expected to stand on your own. Well, Timothy was in his probably 18 or 19 when he got converted, and Paul made him a missionary to Ephesus probably when he was 20 or 21, after he had mentored him for 2 or 3 years. So Timothy is in this culture where he's a very young person, but a very wise person, and endowed by the Holy Spirit. He's got the power he needs, but he doesn't have the respect he needs. And Timothy wants to come back and be with Paul, because it's a struggle for him to fight this fight in this church in an area that he's really not from. He's actually from Damascus, in that area, south of there, and where Syria is now. And he's kind of in a foreign country, in a foreign culture, and he's too young to be doing what Paul wants him to do, and he's kind of ready to throw it up, and Paul's saying, no, it's okay, it's okay. And then when we get to chapter 4, we'll talk about that in more detail, but the rub is, don't let anyone look down on your youth. Okay? Bottom line is, if it's not me that I have to depend on or rely on to get the job done, what is it? What has God provided? If God was to say to me tomorrow, go do this, what would be my excuse? What's most people's excuse?
That you're not strong enough to do it.
I'm not strong enough. I'm not educated enough.
I don't want to.
I don't want to. Yeah, there you go. Any old excuse will do.
That's very honest.
I don't want to.
Fear. Fear.
Okay.
Fear.
Fear. What if I fail? What if I go over there and just totally lose it? Okay. What should I be thinking?
You got it, dude. I can do all things
If God
through
told me to
Christ.
do it, there's no excuse. He's already paved the way. He's already laid the path down. he's got everything ready for me when I get there. All I have to do is be obedient. You know? Back when God told Moses to get some people to do some cold things, some gold sculpturing for the tabernacle, have some people make angels out of gold, have some people do carpentry work for the Ark of the Covenant, gold foil. They had to pound the gold out and make foil coverings for different things. And Moses said, I don't have any people that can do that. They're a bunch of bricklayers. And God said, I will enable them. Just tell them to do it. And they started to do it, and probably no greater talk about artifact in the whole history of humanity than the beauty of the Ark of the Covenant.
So is it normal if God says do this, this is what I want you to do, and you go and you start working and doing it, and then everybody around you saying, you're crazy, this isn't gonna work, you're crazy. You just say, sorry, gotcha, this is the way I feel God wanted me to go, and I'm gonna do it. He's gonna lay the path, and he's gonna...
When I was in my 20s,
Give me
I had
the
a real
tools.
good friend named Ron Wood. We went to Wyoming and hunted together. We went to Colorado and hunted together. We fished together. We played on 2 softball teams together. We went to church together. And he was a really successful farmer. His dad was a successful farmer. He bought one of his dad's farms and set up and began to do farming. He was into cattle more than he was grain, but he was very good at what he did. And he went out to Oklahoma, to McLeod, Oklahoma, and he visited a Indian camp out there, Kickapoo Indian Camp. And while he was out there, God told him that he wanted to, the missionary, they hadn't had a missionary running the camp for several years because the old missionary died and nobody had picked up the ball. Well, while I was out there, he got the message. He said, God told me that he wanted me to do this. Well, how did God do that? Did you hear a voice? You know, everybody was questioning, just like you said. Did God speak? Did he send you a letter? And everybody's kind of making fun of him. Okay? He said, I'm supposed to go, we're going. He put his farm up for sale. He put all his tractors up for sale. He auctioned everything off. He burned his bridges because he firmly believed he was supposed to do it.
Right.
So he loads up and he heads for Oklahoma. His brothers and his father bought the farm and bought all the tractors, so when he came to his senses, he'd have a place to come back to. They literally did that. They said, well, we're buying the farm and we're buying the tractors and we're going to buy everything, and then when he comes to his senses, he can come back home. Went out there as a missionary for 42 years. The mission grew. I went out there 19 years to do church camp for the Indian kids, and we had a great time for night. Kids got saved. I mean, the mission grew, and you know, the first thing people said was, "You're not a preacher. You're not a missionary. You're a farmer. Doesn't matter. If God tells you to do it, that's where you're supposed to be." A lot of, speaking of fear, a lot of people say, well, you know, cannibals live in that area. They might eat you. If God tells you to go there, the cannibals aren't going to eat you. Because the safest place in the world that you can be is where God tells you to be. Because if you're there, God's protection's there, and His will is there, and you'll be safe. That's kind of hard to, you know, it's easier to say than to do when you, have you ever seen a cannibal? They're not friendly people. Okay?
I don't think so.
They're, it's kind of intimidating.
Do they work at Walmart? Some of them?
Yeah, paoli. I don't know how the paoli Walmart decided to hire the people. It'd be crazy. Anyway, okay. So he's urging Timothy, he's encouraging Timothy, You need to stay, you need to do this, okay? Number 3, what is the significance of command? The Greek word for command, what is that? You don't know, could look it up. How about if I tell you?
Yeah.
The Greek word for command means coming from the top. It would be the order of a general, not your sergeant, not your lieutenant, not your captain. It would be a command that would come from the top. Okay? And let's read it again. It says, went into Macedonia, stay there in Ephesus, so that you may command certain men. Had the ultimate authority over them. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew you were supposed to confront something, but you didn't want to deal with the kickback?
Have you been hiding at my work? I mean, that's what I want to know.
Okay, get
Gotta
specific.
Oh.
Say again, what's the question?
I said, have you been hiding at my work?
No, I've been hiding at your word. No, but the Holy Spirit has, and we're all in communication with the Holy Spirit, so, you know.
Well, this has been good this morning.
If this is where God told you to go, you are in command. You have the authority of the throne of God to do what you have been called to do. And you're to walk into the building, you know, not to lord over people, but to have the confidence that you are in charge by the order of an almighty God, and in his authority, and all of his resources are backing you up. And I don't care who it is that confronts you. There's a verse in the Old Testament that says, no weapon or no enemy, depending on the version, no weapon or no enemy formed against me can prosper. When I was coming up in the post office, and I was doing very well and getting promoted every day that I was eligible, there were certain jobs that you had to be in this job for 6 months before you could apply for another job or a higher job, and some of the jobs you had to be in that job for a year before you could apply for another job. And you know, I would go into the interviews, and people who should have been more qualified than me, I was real young. I was kind of a Timothy back then. I was going up to this postmaster's job against people that were 20 years older than me. Of course, they had seniority, and they thought it was their job. Well, I'd walk in, I walked in this one, he said, well, do you really want to go through this? I said, well, if it's, you know, if I'm not eligible, there's no reason for me to waste your time. He said, oh, no, you got the job. He said, and we can sit around in here for 15, 20 minutes so they'll think I interviewed you. I'm 27 years old, or 37 years old. I'm sitting here thinking, well, okay, fine. He said, well, let's just make it look good. And we sat there and talked about baseball and basketball and whatever else was going on. He said, well, this is long enough. He gets on that intercom, says, send the next guy in, send Paul in, and he interviewed Paul, and he did. And 2 days later, I got the notice that I had the job. Well, if that's where God wanted me to be, he really didn't have a choice. He was going to, you know, all through the Bible, God used people who were he used Pilate, he used Herod, he used Nebuchadnezzar, he used Cyrus, the Persian. He used all those people to bring about. He used Pharaoh. For 400 years, he used Pharaoh to let Israel grow in protection until they were ready to take over the homeland. And then when Pharaoh decided that he didn't want to be obedient, Pharaoh got hammered big time. Okay? God's in charge. And if he tells you to go do it, you're in charge. And you've got all of God's resources backing you up. Now don't go in there and start acting like God. But go in there with the confidence that if you're supposed to be there, God's got it covered. Okay? Did that answer your question? Is that more than you want? All right, all right. It's a Greek military word that indicates orders handed down from the highest possible level. Okay, so he's saying when you deal with these people, you deal with them like you're in charge. Like you got your word from God. In the present world, it would indicate like an order received from a general back at the Pentagon, for instance. What is Paul indicating Timothy's role was to be?
Tell people not to false teach.
Yep. He was supposed to correct the false teaching. So he's supposed to go in there and he's supposed to say, now he's probably dealing with people that are 40 or 50 years old. People who have religious experience either at the Jewish level or since this is Asia Minor and on the edge of Greece, it had probably people who had religious experience with the Greek gods. He's going to walk in there, a young man, 20, 22, 23 years old, and say, your gods are a joke.
I don't think he's going to start it that way.
What?
I don't think he's going to start it that way.
Well, basically, but that's what he needs to do. He needs to go in there and say, there is an almighty God. His name is Jehovah. It starts with Abraham. There's the Red Sea thing, and there's the Jordan River thing, and there's the conquering of the Promised Land. And, you know, you can see all through history the thread where God has laid down his presence and his legitimacy and his authority. And you people need to consider this. And you can't come into my church and start preaching false teaching. Okay. It wouldn't happen today, right? Now, you know, the final church in Revelation is the church of Laodicea, which is the lukewarm church. And I don't know if you've been watching or not, but church as a whole, I'm talking about, not talking about Bonds Chapel or small conservative churches that are away from the mainstream and are hanging on to good doctrine. But if you go into some of the big churches today in the cities, there's some despicable things going on. Some despicable. The 38th Street Christian Church in 1982 had a seance in the basement. Not 38th Street Methodist Church, not Christian Church. 38th Street Methodist Church in Indianapolis in 1982 had a seance in the basement. Because they wanted to understand other people's religion and other people's beliefs. If I give you a gallon of pure water and put a teaspoonful of dirt in it, do you want to drink it? I ruined the whole gallon. And if you let that stuff creep in and seep in and crawl in, all it does is corrupt the good that's there. And it touches all of it. There is no place where you can pour water out of that gallon that's going to be clean. It is all damaged. Okay? That's kind of the way it is with letting things come into the church. If they're not doctrinal, and if they're not scriptural, and if they're not ordained by God, they don't need to be there. You hear the news of Chick-fil-A this week? Well, about 5 years ago, they took a stand that there was, they didn't take a stand against the LGBT whatever, but they endorsed traditional marriage. And the LGBT whatever, they had a fit. They exploded. They called for a boycott of everything, every Chick-fil-A. New York City wouldn't let them build new restaurants in New York City because they were discriminating against the LGBT. Now, I think we ought to love the LGBT. I think we ought to minister to them. I think we ought to bring them down and teach them and give them a choice. I think we ought to try to understand them, but we cannot turn our church over to them. Okay? Well, that was the daddy who did all that. And what happened when the LGBT called for a boycott?
They prospered.
Chick-fil-A grew exponentially. They exploded. Since that day to today, they are 5 times bigger and 5 times more prosperous than they were. God blessed them. This week, the man's son took over, and he ordered that all Christian donations would stop. No money would go to the Salvation Army, and he put a gay man in charge of the finances or in charge of the trust fund, and now the LGB is getting millions of dollars from Chick-fil-A. How could you see God's blessing in the midst of all this turmoil and not understand that God had something to do with it, and then turn around 3 or 4 years later, maybe 5 now, and go the exact opposite direction and jeopardize that blessing that God gave you? How can you do that? Penny's did it and endorsed Allen, and their stock went from $65 a share. This morning it's $12. Okay. Kmart did it. Do you realize that Kmart was at one point one of the highest pornography sellers in all of the United States? Kmart was. They owned 7-Eleven, and 7-Eleven had the book racks with the hustlers and all that. And that's where everybody went to get their, and they owned some other stores that also sold it. But Kmart, and so the Christians boycotted Kmart, and Kmart stock went from like $80 a share down to $9, $10 a share, and they're shutting Kmart's down everywhere. Okay? It goes back to that, no enemy formed against me shall prosper. You are going to see Chick-fil-A drop like a rock. They are going to be closing restaurants because they have spit in the face of God, and God said, no enemy formed against me shall prosper. It's not going to happen. So, what's a role to play? He's to be in command. He's to correct the situation. He's to look at these people and he's to say, it's got to stop, and it's got to stop now. So, what was the teaching? What was the heresy that came into the church in that? It was called Gnosticism, and it starts with a G. And come back next week knowing what that is, and we'll talk about it. Okay?
Spell that. Yeah.
Pardon me?
Spell that, she said.
Gnosticism. Gnosticism. And it's still alive today. It's still alive today. Okay, we'll pick up there next week, and I'm going to try to get to verse 3 next week.
Is that where the word agnostic comes from?
It comes off of it. It's a little bit of a change from it, but it's the mother of agnosticism.
And over time,
Oh yeah, they run away a lot.